Hi, this is Leonhard Bartosek. I'm starting this YouTube project called Collective Utopia, Heaven on Earth. About a year ago I wrote 60 episodes that I will stream once a week. So I already have more or less the content of a year, and I will read out every chapter every week, more or less at the same time before the weekend. What is this YouTube channel all about? I'm going to tell you a bit about the genesis of this project, and then what the content is all about, and the structure of how I'm going to interact with my audience, with my listeners, and with my readers. So I'm going to tell you a bit about how this all came about. I'm an artist, I'm a musician, and over the last few years I collected a lot of material about our system, the status quo, the world that we're living in, and all the global crises that are coming together, and which kind of paint quite a grim perspective for the future of this planet. And for many years I was collecting material, listening to podcasts, reading books, trying to understand the status quo, how our system developed, and in which more and more I was more and more interested in, okay, so how can we solve these problems? What could be a solution? In which direction could we develop? What could be a utopian future, a better future? What could be a collective utopia? Because I can have my own ideas, but I think it's not enough trying to convince everyone into my own particular perspective, because what life makes interesting is the fact that every human being has his or her very particular perspective, personality, and I think we have to find a mode to integrate all these different perspectives into a bigger picture that is drawing us towards a better future. So this idea is reflected in the aesthetic of the book, of how I wrote the text, but also the structure of how I want to publish and integrate everyone into the project. So structurally, I wrote this text, but I give you the opportunity to write a comment, on YouTube, and I will also publish these texts on Substack as a blog. And everyone who is writing a comment, and I see as a valuable contribution, I will integrate into the text for the print version. So at the very end, I'm planning to publish a print version of this project. And if you write a comment, it will be integrated to draw a more vivid picture, a multi-perspective picture of this very complex issues. And I also, to make this a collective utopia, a radical democratic collective utopia, I'm integrating a game, so to say, to involve you in the way of how the money is going to be redistributed. So if according to the number of words that you're going to have written into a particular chapter, you will get a tiny fraction of the gains of the project paid back. So this is the structure as such. About the content, I've read all these particular literature and was collecting my own particular ideas and wrote them down within the last few years. And then I had enough material and thought, okay, now I'm going to write a book. So I started with this idea. I'm going to write like a proper non-fictional book in the sense that I have a particular thesis, I have some topics that I want to develop, and I try to develop a text that is as stringent as possible and conveying my audience into believing that my perspective is an interesting perspective and everyone should follow my ideas. And then I had all these bits and pieces of content written out as a manuscript, and I went to Scopello in Italy, in Sicily, at the north shore of Sicily, to a very beautiful place. And in order to have enough space and time and concentration to write this book. And then I'm there sitting, looking down at the ocean, at this incredibly beautiful place. And somehow the words that I wrote before, they just didn't speak to me anymore. It was impossible to, I could not relate anymore to the stuff that I wrote before. So I just put my manuscript and dumped it into the garbage. I thought, okay, I'm going to start completely with a new approach, and I'm trying to do what I'm used to do as an artist. I just improvise. I try to feel the nature, the place, and I try to just surf with my ideas and go into resonance with the place where I am, and I'm just starting to write intuitively about my thoughts. So this is what I did, and I developed a text which became much more intuitive, also as some sort of like a very personal kind of diary, and writing about my experiences of nature, and all interwoven with these broader political and cultural and spiritual ideas that I was trying to write about. So the result is this very intuitive text, fragmented text, that I gave space within the text, empty parts, so to say, that you can fill, to give space for different perspectives that I can try to integrate into the text later with the help of the comments of the readers. And I will read all these chapters over the next year, once a week. And for now, I'm trying to introduce the basic ideas, what the content is all about, because I developed these ideas around basically 3 columns, and I try to paint a landscape that you have a bit of an orientation what we are going to discuss and what is discussed in the text that I wrote. So first of all, I start with the first column, so to say, the status quo. Status quo. So what I mean by that, of course, is today, one could call it consumption capitalism. Capitalism as the system. So where we want to go, what we are thriving to, is a collective utopia. Collective utopia. So this is, of course, the future, a post-capitalist world, if you want, in about 50 years. This is what I'm just writing down, because I think that the transformation from today, from our capitalist world to a completely different world of a collective utopia is going to take some time. This is not going to happen from today until tomorrow. So this is what I try to indicate with this kind of arrow pointing to the future in a dynamic way, because we will have to go to quite some serious and probably also some painful transformations until we reach that better future. At the top, I'm writing down the spiritual dimension. So I'm convinced that we have to integrate the spiritual dimension in the broadest term into this process of transformation if we want to really successfully and profoundly want to transform our system today. So we go through this spiritual dimension in order to reach a better future. And at the bottom, I'm going to write down the experience of decline, a collective powerlessness. This is going to be a necessary experience, because if you think of it, the status quo today, our economic system and the ideology that is stabilizing this economic system is so powerful with all the machinery of propaganda today that it's hardly imaginable for us today to really think of a different, better collective utopia. There's a very famous saying that people can imagine the end of the world, but they cannot imagine the end of capitalism. So we will be forced to experience this collective powerlessness under real societal decline in order to rip apart the system of today. Because nowadays we try to fix all our problems still within the system of capitalism. If you think of all the, for example, all these climate meetings of the world leaders, they always think and try to solve the problems within our system, and this is not going to work. I personally don't believe in reform, because capitalism as such is reborn again and again, and is furthering the very dynamic of capitalism, which is the dynamics and the logic of money and exploitation. So I think we have to experience decline and collective powerlessness. We will integrate the spiritual dimension, and that is something that is really important, that has to me has a key role also in the book, because if you think of like a more traditional leftist perspective, this dimension is completely missing. This has some very particular historical reasons why historical materialism was cutting off religion and spirituality, because at that time, of course, the church had such a powerful influence, negative influence in society. It was like hindering the development of science, of rational thinking, etc. So that the avant-garde intellectual people at that time thought that they have to get rid of the spiritual dimension, and but I think, out of my perspective, this way we threw the child out of the bath. I think this, you can say this in English as well. This is a German saying maybe, and lost the roots to something that is very fundamental, human, and archaic. And so this is another column that I'm going to expand on. If we think of the collective utopia, I want to integrate something that through this process of transformation, we're going to develop a completely different level for the reverence of life. Because today we use life and nature basically as a capitalist commodity in order to make money, and that is the exact reason why we just exploit and destroy our planet. And we will have a spiritual consensus, in freedom. And here down at the root, we will develop modes of radical democracy and I'm also wrote like solving the problem of power, solving problem of power. Because this is the very idea of democracy, of course, is trying to bend the dynamics of power, but we did not really think about integrating money and the economy as such, because money and power goes together, and within our current system, all the money flows to the top, to the very few, and we have to find modes of breaking up that kind of power and democratizing money and economy. Because if you think of our current economy, it has nothing to do with democracy. All the companies, the big companies, the small companies, they're always directed from top to down. Like nobody is voting his or her CEO. It's always the other way around. So we will have to have a real transformation that goes to the roots of the power problem. Okay, so this is the landscape that I tried to paint, so that you have a bit of an idea and an orientation what the text that I'm going to read to you over the next year is going to be about. And now I'm going to read the very first chapter as an introduction to this whole project. First preface. October the 4th, 2021. Paradise. I'm sitting here in a beautiful place. Yes, so close to heaven on earth. On one of the many terraces in the Parco Rubestre Re Ferdinando in the small village of Scopello in Sicily. This small park on the rocky outcrop directly above the famous rock formation in the sea at Scopello has been lovingly created by Tullio over the last 40 years, little by little. Tullio, the landlord, a lively, loud, widely gesticulating and warm-hearted 83-year-old head of character, so typical of the area, he wears his heart on his tongue. I look down the rock. In the steep rock face, cacti, artemisia and wild olive trees have taken root. I look down into the abyss at the world. What world am I looking at? At heaven on earth? But what is missing? Where are we today and why? And how can we rid ourselves of this world and build a new one, a more loving one more worth living in? For this, I would like to bring a few ideas and provide impulses. The world, a world, is created in relationship between lives, between people. For this reason alone, I cannot design and build a new world on the drawing board as an individual. A new world arises in the intermediate area, in the exchange, in the dialogue, and in relationship. That is why I'm writing this book, namely in this form, in this format, as a dialogue with my readers, an exchange, as a collection of ideas for a new world, a more beautiful, more joyful world, closer to heaven on earth, a collective utopia. When I look up from the abyss to the horizon, a breathtaking view opens up before me, along the rocky coast and rich green vegetation into the sea, in iridescent blue, interrupted by streaks of purple color, up to the sky's edge. The horizon of the sea merges with the blue of the firmament. I let my gaze wander upward. It gets stuck on a few clouds and meanders between the vague contour of the clouds and infinity. Heaven on earth, also a question of the angle of view.